Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at something that is, honestly, it's a little unnerving.
Yeah, unnerving is a good word for it.
Right. Because usually when we grab a book or, a research paper for the show, we're looking at a standard method. Just straightforward stuff like do X to get Y or eat this specific thing to live longer.
Right? The standard how-to manual that we see all the time.
Exactly. But the source material we have today, this document called The Forge, it isn't a manual at all. It feels more like a weapon.
Hmm.
Or maybe a shield. It actually describes itself as a Q&A deck for adversarial readiness.
Adversarial readiness. I mean, that is an incredibly heavy phrase for a wellness tool. It immediately sets a specific tone, doesn't it?
It really does. It feels almost aggressive. So the context here is a self-help framework called animator shift, or AS for short.
Mm.
And the creator of this framework evidently isn't content to just put the idea out into the world and, hope for the best.
Definitely not.
They have written a literal battle plan. They've anticipated every single person who might hate this idea, from hard-nosed neuroscientists and CBT therapists to spiritual gurus, burnt-out parents, and even internet trolls. And they have scripted a highly specific rhetorical defense for each one.
It's fascinating because it reads less like a guru teaching a wellness class and more like a defense attorney prepping for a high-stakes trial. They use this four-part system, acknowledge, distinguish, bridge, and land to dismantle objections before they even happen. It is highly, highly structured.
So that is our mission today. We're going to unpack animator shift, what it actually is, because it makes some very bold claims about shifting your identity state in under 7 minutes, often just 60 seconds.
Which is a huge promise.
A massive promise.
Yeah.
But I'm almost more interested in the defense itself. How do they argue against hard science? How do they argue against things like The Secret? Because the arguments in this deck are surprisingly sharp.
They really are. And I think the best place to start is with the core claim, because everything else in the document defends this one point. Animator shift claims that most of us are walking around in an identity state we simply didn't choose. We wake up, we feel depleted or anxious, and we just accept that as who we are today.
Right, like, I guess I'm just grumpy today. There's nothing I can do about it.
Exactly. And AES argues that is a fundamental failure of agency. It's essentially a protocol to interrupt that state, using the body, not the mind, and switch to a completely different one. They call it shifting the frequency.
And that word right there, frequency, is the very first landmine. Because let's be real, as soon as you say frequency or energy or vibes, you instantly lose half the room to the skeptics.
Oh, absolutely.
And the other half thinks you're talking about literal magic.
Which brings us perfectly to the first major section of the deck, which is the spiritual battleground. I was reading the skeptic and LOA purist cards, LOA being law of attraction, and the deck is fighting a two-front war here. On one side, they have to prove they aren't just the secret repackaged with a slick new logo.
It's a valid critique, though, isn't it? If I say shift your energy, it sounds a lot like manifesting. Like, just think positive and a Ferrari appears in your driveway.
It does sound like that. But the deck makes a distinction that I think is actually quite profound. It tackles what I like to call the cosmic waiter model.
The cosmic waiter. I like that.
Yeah, so in most law of attraction circles, the power is external. You put a request out to the universe, I would like one abundance, please, and the universe provides it. It relies on a pretty heavy level of magical thinking. It places the agency completely outside of yourself.
Where you're just sitting at the table waiting for the delivery.
Exactly. And the Forge deck shuts that down completely. It says there is nothing to receive. You are already the energy.
Yes, I highlighted the killer line from that exact card. It says the universe didn't send it, you chose it.
That is a massive pivot in your locus of control. It strips all the mysticism away. You aren't waiting for permission or a gift from a deity. You are the generator. It essentially argues that waiting for the universe to send you a high vibe is just another form of passivity. It's basically saying, stop waiting for the mailman because you are the printing press.
I really love that visual. But they also have to fight the other side of the spiritual coin, right? The good vibes only crowd. Because the deck spends a lot of time talking about hierarchy and how toxic that can actually be.
This was one of the stickiest insights for me personally. In the spiritual community, there is often this unspoken moral hierarchy. High vibe is good joy, gratitude, abundance. Low vibe is bad sadness, anger, fatigue. So if you're sad, you're low vibe, which implies you're failing or just doing it wrong.
Which just creates shame. You end up feeling bad about feeling bad, which is an awful loop to be in.
Precisely. And the deck argues that this causes people to perform frequency rather than actually shift it. You fake a smile so you don't look low vibe to your friends. You pretend everything is great. Animator Shift argues that frequency must be non-hierarchical. Being depleted isn't a sin. It's just data.
Data, not a diagnosis.
Right. The text says non-hierarchical doesn't mean all frequencies are equal. It means none of them make you a bad person. That distinction is so crucial because you can't shift a state you're busy judging. If you're ashamed of being anxious, you're just stuck inside the anxiety. But if you view anxiety simply as a loadout or a suit of armor you're currently wearing, you can take it off.
It effectively removes all the morality from the equation. You aren't a bad person for being angry. You're just currently running the anger program.
Exactly. And once it's just a program, you can close the window.
Okay, so they've built this fortress against the spiritual folks. They've distanced themselves from magic and from toxic positivity. But then they turn around and face the other side of the room, which is arguably way tougher. The scientists, the academics, the cognitive behavioral therapists.
The scientific standoff. Honestly, this is where most self-help frameworks just completely fall apart. They try to fake the science. They use words like quantum incorrectly to sound smart, the quantum entanglement of your soul.
Does this deck do that? Because I see the word frequency and my skeptical radar immediately goes up.
Surprisingly, no. They really don't try to outscience a scientist. There's a card where a CBT therapist asks, where are the peer-reviewed studies? And an academic asks, what is the exact neurological mechanism? The deck recommends a very candid, almost shocking answer. We don't know yet.
That's bold. Usually people scramble to cite some obscure, flawed study from 1972 to back up their claims.
Instead, they use a metaphor that I think changes the entire conversation. They compare things like CBT cognitive behavioral therapy and internal family systems to an app, and they call Animator Shift the operating system.
Wait, let's unpack that. Because at first glance, that just sounds like a slick marketing slogan.
It's much deeper than that. Think about how CBT actually works. It's thought first. You catch a distorted thought, you analyze it, you reframe it. It requires a lot of cognitive bandwidth. It's a highly complex program you run in your prefrontal cortex.
Okay, so CBT is like Microsoft Word.
Sure, exactly. The argument in the Forge is that you can't run a high-functioning app on a crashed operating system. If your nervous system is trapped in fight or flight, if the electricity or the frequency is frantic, your cognitive brain is literally offline. You cannot do the CBT work because the biological hardware isn't supporting it.
So they're saying AS isn't competing with therapy at all. It's preparing the terrain for it.
Exactly. They call it a precognitive intervention. You don't try to think your way out of anxiety because the thinking apparatus itself is what's broken in that moment. You use the body posture, breath, somatic anchoring to shift the OS first. Then, once the biological system is stable, you can run the CBT app.
I do really like the line from the deck about that. It says, we don't fix thoughts, we change the electricity running through them. That's a great image. But as a skeptic, and I have to play the skeptic here, if they admit they have zero randomized controlled trials, why should you or I trust it?
That's the exact question the CBT therapist card addresses head-on. The defense they use is what they call phenomenological sequence.
Which translates to what, exactly?
It translates to, does it work when you do it? They point out that mindfulness meditation was practiced for 2,500 years before we had fMRI machines to prove it physically changed the brain. CBT existed in practice for 20 years before the landmark clinical trials validated it. Their argument is, we didn't wait for the study to build the practice.
So it's a practice-first approach.
Yes. They do admit they are actively working on biometric tracking, using things like heart rate variability and galvanic skin response to prove the shift is physically real, but they are unapologetic about the fact that currently the proof is entirely in the user experience. It's a risky stance, but it is intellectually honest. They aren't inventing fake studies to look legitimate.
It is honest. It's basically saying, look, we can't prove how it works in a lab just yet, but try it for 60 seconds and tell us if it works for you in your living room.
Which is how most human innovation actually happens. The theoretical proof usually lags way behind the practical discovery.
All right, so we've handled the mystics and the scientists. But let's get practical. Because when I read the actual protocol breathing, thinking about who I want to be, it sounds an awful lot like things I've heard a million times before. Specifically, meditation and habit building.
This is segment 3 of the deck, the mechanics. And you're absolutely right. On the surface, it looks very similar to those things, but the distinctions they make in the deck are razor sharp, and they really need to be.
Let's start with meditation then. I sit, I breathe, I observe my thoughts. How is Animator Shift any different?
The deck argues that meditation is fundamentally about sustained attention. It asks you to observe the noise in your head. The ultimate goal is witnessing. I see the thought, I let it go. Animator shift, on the other hand, asks you to choose.
Meditation asks you to observe, as S asks you to choose.
The primary critique in the source material is that pure witnessing simply isn't enough for modern high-performance life. You can witness your anxiety all day long, but at some point, you still have to go into a high-stakes meeting. You need a bridge between seeing your current state and being effective in the world. SS is that bridge. It's not just passively watching the car drive off the cliff, it's grabbing the steering wheel.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's a much more active stance. What about habits then? James Clear and atomic habits. That is the absolute gold standard for behavioral change right now. Why isn't this just building a habit of being confident?
This was actually my favorite metaphor in the entire deck. The source says atomic habits is about behavioral architecture. It's about stacking actions, put on your running shoes, run 1 mile. But animator shift is about the identity frequency that drives that behavior in the first place.
The quote I wrote down was, atomic habits builds the house, as chooses the neighborhood.
It is the perfect analogy. You can have excellent habits, you can have a perfectly built, beautiful house, but if you build it in a neighborhood called desperate hustle or panic, you are going to be miserable living in that house.
That really resonates. I think you and I have both had days where we did all the right things on our to-do list. We exercised, we crushed the inbox, we drank our water, but we did them with this frantic, tight-chested energy all day.
Exactly. The habits were completely right, but the frequency was entirely wrong. As argues that if you don't set the frequency first, your highly optimized habits will just amplify your current negative state. If you hustle while you're anxious, you just get much more efficient at being anxious.
So let's walk through the actual how-to. If you wake up tomorrow morning and you feel like a wet sock, just totally unmotivated and below what is the actual protocol, the deck outlines 3 distinct steps.
Step 1 is recognition. This loops right back to that non-hierarchical data concept. You have to clearly name the identity you woke up in.
So I literally say out loud, I am the wet sock.
Or, I am waking up as the imposter. Or, I am waking up as the depleted. You have to explicitly label the avatar you are currently animating. No judgment, just naming it. You have to admit where your starting line is today.
Okay, got it. Step 2.
Choice. This is the somatic interruption. The deck says this is usually a 30 to 60 second physical reset. It involves highly specific breathwork and posture changes. You are physically breaking the biological pattern of the old state. You can't think your way out. You have to move your way out.
And step 3.
Embodiment. You actively declare the new frequency. I am operating as the strategist. I am the calm anchor. And this is the key differentiator. You have to anchor it in the body. You have to genuinely feel what that new identity feels like in your chest, in your shoulders, in your breathing.
So it's not just an affirmation. I'm not just staring in the bathroom mirror saying I am happy while I'm crying on the inside.
No, and the deck is aggressively specific about that point. Affirmations are often just hollow words overlaid on top of deep doubt. This protocol is a whole system boot up. You are trying to align the entire nervous system to the new reality before you start a single task.
That brings us to the big why. Why go through all this trouble every day? The deck has a section on weak spots in specific contexts, and I was really struck by the executive card.
Yeah.
The objection they anticipate is, this is just wellness theater, we have financial targets to hit, I don't have time to sit and breathe.
The defense they script for that is brilliant. It reframes the entire conversation from wellness to risk management.
It's not wellness, it's risk management.
Think about it from a purely logical standpoint. If a CEO walks into a crucial negotiation operating from a frequency of insecurity or panic, that is a literal financial liability for the company. They are guaranteed to make a reactive, poor decision. The deck argues one reactive decision costs far more than 1 minute of alignment.
That is the ultimate business case. It's a straight cost-benefit analysis.
It is. It plainly says culture is just aggregated nervous systems. If your leadership team is running on a frantic OS, your corporate culture is frantic, no matter how many nice core values you paint on the lobby wall.
But what about the complete other end of the spectrum, the parent card?
Yeah.
I have toddlers screaming, I don't have a minute, I barely have a spare second to think.
This one felt very grounded and real. The objection is completely valid. Time is a massive luxury for parents. The reframe they offer is, if you have one breath, you have time. They suggest using what they call doorway transitions.
I love this concept. Walk us through how that works.
Before you physically walk from the kitchen to the living room, you take one intentional breath and reset. You actively choose who is walking through that door. Is it the frustrated employee who just got off a terrible Zoom call? Or is it the present, calm parent? The killer line in this section is, your nervous system sets the room tone.
That's heavy. If you walk in chaotic, the kids instantly get chaotic.
Exactly. You think you're hiding your stress, but biologically you're broadcasting it. Kids and pets are incredibly excellent at picking up on that invisible broadcast.
Now, we need to address the elephant in the room. The deck actually lists weak spots. It openly admits where the framework is vulnerable.
Which I found incredibly refreshing. Usually these self-help frameworks claim to be perfectly flawless.
They list unfalsifiability. They admit that the animator, this core part of you that supposedly does the choosing, is a philosophical concept, not a physical node you can point to in a brain scan.
Right. They admit it's a user-facing metaphor. We don't know if there is actually a homunculus or a soul pulling the levers behind your eyes, but their counter-argument is unfalsifiable isn't the same thing as unuseful.
Precision of experience over precision of jargon.
Exactly. If telling yourself, I am the animator, gives you the agency to stop yelling at your kids, then it works. The biological mechanism matters far less than the behavioral outcome.
They also include a very serious warning about trauma. And I think we absolutely need to highlight this because it's highly responsible on their part.
This is vital. They explicitly, clearly state, AS is not therapy. If someone is dealing with deep unresolved trauma, the channel is functionally blocked.
The metaphor they used compared somatic experiencing to animator shift.
Right. They say somatic experiencing, or SE, clears the channel. Animator shift simply chooses the broadcast. If you try to broadcast a high-performance success frequency through a channel that is blocked by severe trauma, it just won't work. You need to clear the fundamental safety issues first. They are very, very careful not to overpromise as a medical cure here.
Let's zoom out to the broader philosophy behind this for a minute. Segment 5. The whole structure hinges on this core concept of the animator.
It's the grand distinction between the character being played and the player holding the controller.
The deck references William James, the pioneering psychologist.
The selecting agency. The foundational idea is that you are not your anxiety. You are the consciousness that is currently perceiving the anxiety. Most of us fuse entirely with our feelings. We say, I am sad. As Askia asks you to shift that to, I am experiencing sadness, and then realize there is an I that is totally separate from the sadness itself.
And that separate I is the animator.
Correct. And because that I is separate, it has the capacity to put down the sadness and pick up a different tool.
It sounds a little bit like Tony Robbins, doesn't it? State change,
Yeah.
jumping up and down on a trampoline to radically change your physiology.
The deck actually has a Tony Robbins practitioner card built right in. They knew that exact comparison was coming.
Of course they did. They anticipated everything. How do they distinguish themselves from him?
They classify Robbins' method as high-intensity transformation. It's the massive rock concert. It's the immersive weekend seminar. It's amazing, but it requires a massive output of physical energy. They position animator shift as low-friction daily state authorship.
It's the daily commute, not the stadium concert.
Exactly. It's designed specifically to be sustainable. You can't scream and violently pump your chest in the middle of a quiet open-plan office, but you absolutely can do a subtle 60-second breath reset at your desk. It's the mundane Monday morning protocol, not the massive Sunday night breakthrough.
There's one last major critique they dodge, which is the guru problem. Is this whole thing just going to become a cult of personality around the founder?
The one-person operation objection. Their defense there is that they are actively building a decentralized system, not a personal following. They talk heavily about certification and decentralizing the power. They want the credential to be the work itself, not the charismatic person leading it. Whether that actually happens in reality is certainly up for debate. History is full of well-meaning systems that turned into personality cults. But at least the explicit intent to create a standalone framework is written right into the DNA of the document.
So we've walked all the way through the battlefield. We've seen the intellectual armor. We've seen the scientific standoff and the spiritual defense. What is the final verdict? What should we ultimately take away from the Forge?
For me, looking at this strictly as a researcher, the most impressive thing isn't even the breathing method itself. It's the sheer intellectual rigor of the document.
The discipline of building the defense.
Yes. To sit down and force yourself to write out the absolute strongest possible arguments against your own life's work, and then answer them logically without getting defensive, without attacking the character of the person asking, That is a masterclass practice in itself. Adversarial readiness is a skill we could all use in daily life. Imagine if we prepped for our own business meetings or personal conflicts like this.
Right, coming in and saying, here are the 10 reasons my idea completely sucks, and here's exactly why we should do it anyway.
Exactly. It creates a level of bulletproof confidence that isn't just blind arrogance, it's deeply grounded.
And regarding the actual method itself, animator shift, it really seems to boil down to just two words: speed and agency.
It is democratizing the ability to regulate your own nervous system. You don't need to believe in quantum physics, and you don't need to spend 10 years sitting silently on a meditation cushion. It is offering a very fast, tactical way to reclaim that tiny gap between stimulus and your response.
Taking the controls back for yourself.
Precisely.
I want to leave everyone listening with the thought that stuck with me, the absolute most from this entire deck. It's that direct challenge regarding your morning routine. The source argues that your identity is basically a vacuum. If you don't consciously fill it, something else will gladly fill it for you.
Yes, most people let their morning email choose their frequency. This is choosing it first.
That hit me so hard. How many days have you or I woken up feeling totally okay, checked our phones in bed, and immediately let a stranger's demanding email dictate our entire mood for the next 8 hours?
You're just letting the inbox animate you.
So as you go about your day-to-day, ask yourself that very question. Who or what chose the identity you are wearing right now? Did you pick it, or did your push notifications pick it for you?
Choose wisely.
And to take that just one step further, something to really mull over later, if you can completely change your identity state in just 60 seconds by breathing differently, what does that mean for the whole concept of a true self? Is there even a core personality down there, or are we all just a collection of interchangeable loadouts waiting to be animated? Think about that. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.